Well, hello, y'all. Thanks for tuning in to the Gabriel Speaks Show. So glad you're here. Glad to see you again. Apologies for having to cut yesterday's live stream a bit short, but sometimes that happens. Life takes precedence sometimes, doesn't it, over this fun video stuff. This episode, we're going to talk about the recent response to John Greenwald's FOIA request for David Grusch's IG complaint. It finally was returned. Now, there's some information in there, but there's also a lot of missing information in there. In fact, there's 44 pages that are completely redacted from this report. It's missing 44 pages. It's missing the formal invocation of PBD-19, and we'll get into PBD-19 and what that is. The SCI revocation, That's the clearance revocation. The confirmed UAP disclosures and the internal intelligence community leaks. So it's missing a few things. We did, however, get a few things confirmed. For instance, all of these things here, the fact Grusch disclosed UAP SAPs. He used classified channels. ODN and DOD, it was IG coordinated. His clearance was revoked. His SAP access was blocked. And as I just mentioned, there are multiple secret pages that we cannot access. Now, the claim that he was retaliated against in this report, from what we can see, is still not resolved. So the complaint was, I'm being retaliated against. My clearance is being retaliated against. My professional career is being retaliated against because I'm investigating these programs. If we look at his claims, he said that his identity and the fact of his UAP disclosures were leaked inside Department of War and the intelligence community, and that he was retaliated against. Now, he formally alleged violations of 50 U.S.C. 3341. That's the retaliation for security clearance. PPD 19, which is whistleblower protections. For special access programs, ICD 120, intelligence community whistleblower laws. So this is the highest level whistleblower pathway that exists. These are, I mean, President Obama is the one who signed into law the whistleblower protections for SAPs. So this is a recent law that was passed. Now we're going to get into the FOIA. Grusch did some interviews just this last month, and it was the first time we'd heard from him for a while, so we're going to take a look at that. And then Luna's claims that Grusch faced some kind of threat while coming in. Apparently, it was not to the actual SCIF, but some kind of SCIF meeting. She would not really clarify. So we're going to take a look at that, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to actually go through this document and go through what we discovered by this FOIA request specifically.
Every single witness we had reached out to said that they didn't want to testify because they were scared for their life. And these were not people that you see in the media. These were not, podcasters or anyone who's made a career talking about it. These were legitimate, former military and or military contractors. And they were literally afraid of being killed. And then you had David Grusch tell us directly that he was actually, felt in fear of his life, and some weird things had happened prior to that first hearing. And then I would encourage all of you to actually reach out to him, because even just yesterday, I actually went into the SCIF with David Grusch and Eric Burleson. And prior to that SCIF meeting happening, there was something really bizarre that took place with David Grusch, and it's being handled at the law enforcement level. But, things like that happening are not normal, especially being that David Grusch is currently Eric Burleson's congressional staffer.
We have had an instance that happened with David Grusch to where he was coming in to testify, or not to testify, but coming in to do a video SCIF conference with Burleson and I. And on the way in, he had a very weird incident that happened that I've never, it's like very coincidental timing, where someone actually pulled a firearm on him as he was driving in. So, and he also too was worried about retribution. He'd been messed with extensively after he testified, even leading up to that testimony. So yeah, we definitely know that our witnesses are putting a lot on the line by coming forward. And so that would also to push for, like, we need UAP disclosure. But every time we try to put it into the NDAA, it gets gutted.
You'll notice in the Schumer amendment, they talk about transclassified foreign nuclear information, TFNI, in the Schumer amendment. And that is not by accident, because you can imagine what that means is, say the U.S. through intelligence operations stole a foreign nuclear secret. Well, the U.S. liked that foreign nuclear secret and wanted to make it their own, so they transclassified it into a U.S. protected nuclear capability. And that's what the Schumer Amendment is trying to espouse, if you read in between the lines, that they've justified it through, these nuclear secrecy provisions. But yes, certainly private companies were involved. The specific ones I did provide to the congressional committees and the inspector general, down to specific facilities.
People say, where is the evidence? What's happening? Why don't we know more right now, almost 2 years later?
Well, certainly the last administration didn't help, and my hearing, of course, was during the last administration, and they were not exactly super transparent on this issue, unfortunately. But now that the task force has been created, I've been able to, guide the members within the boundaries of what they're actually cleared for.
When people look at this, they look online, they say, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of people talking about encounters. There's a lot of people talking about videos, and we've seen a lot of that. Can we just cut it down to, you believe that we have encountered alien beings and that they've come to Earth and that we know about it as a U.S. government?
That seems to be the case. I don't like to characterize necessarily where they came from. They're definitely some kind of non-human sentience, but it is true, believe it or not, we've recovered the vehicles, and we actually have physical proof, and I was actually partially cleared into some of those activities. It was beyond oral testimony provided to me. I actually had partial access to the data and actually read the intelligence reports resulting from those programs.
Like, with your own eyes, correct. You saw it.
Yes. Certainly members of this current administration are very, very well aware of this reality. Certainly the current president is very knowledgeable on this subject, and I trust his leadership on it. And I think he's assembled an A-team cabinet, and I really believe if Trump wants to be the greatest president and the most consequential leader likely in world history, he certainly has the knowledge, the capabilities, and understanding of some of these sensitive government transparency issues.
I have access, and I speak to people about it. I've had actually meetings on it. People that are very smart and very solid have said they believe there is something out there. And, it makes sense that there could be. I've never been convinced, even despite that. I just, for some reason, it's not my thing.
He certainly is very well informed on this issue. Leave it at that. I don't want to get ahead of what the president might want to reveal personally. I was physically threatened even before I sent in my intelligence community inspector general report under the previous administration. I actually had to go and seek legal protection that way because I was, literally in fear both professionally and in my personal life. It is a very uncomfortable, even for me now, as somebody who's seen it, experienced it, even talking about it, because it's so outside a normal person's worldview to understand that there is this biological sentience that have piloted these crafts that don't necessarily look 100% like you and I.
Were there pictures? Were there?
There were. Yes, there were. I've talked to a lot of, I'll call graybeards on the program. That is a subject of hot debate on origin. As a guy trained in physics formally as well in my background, I leave an open mind on what the origin is. Certainly, there is the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and they could be coming from elsewhere off Earth, but I don't usually go there because I did not see that data, and I'm not conversant in the high confidence theories that the U.S. government had.
There are many other governments around the world. Do they know?
They have their own programs, and like I said 2.5 years ago, we have been in arms race with our peer competitors, namely Russia and China, and they have their own programs in this regard. And I was actually able to view a body of intelligence that discussed adversarial programs, and I'll leave it at that. We've seen a mixed bag of activity, and motive and intent, why they're visiting. That's once again, that gets into our assessments, not necessarily, we can't quite understand the intent of some of the sentients and why they're visiting. Could it be because we have interesting genetic material on Earth? We're a Jurassic Park tourist attraction for them. Could be a myriad of reasons.
You've obviously faced intimidation. You talked about harassment. There are reports that others have too.
I say that there's hope. Certainly, Congress values whistleblower information right now, and certainly, I believe there's an appetite with the administration to do the right thing on this as well. And there's some other things that are happening behind the scenes that I'll let the administration discuss when they're ready.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Now, Elections Reform or Parrish, friend of the show, mentions that David Grusch's clearance was reinstated. And yes, his clearance was reinstated. It wasn't fully reinstated. He still does, let me just confirm. Yes, his special program access, SCI, SAPs was not fully restored. But his security clearance eligibility was ultimately reinstated after this. So that's important to note, right? Because there's words and there's the actions that happen. And so the actions in this case do show that he was at least trustworthy enough to get his security clearance back and work for Burleson. They say he's on the staff, just a staffer, but I mean, obviously he's helping him with the UAP task force stuff, like that. Clearly what he's helping him with. So why this stuff matters, why this FOIA report matters, why the Black Vault and John Greenwald is great for, again, requesting public access to this information is because it does confirm a few things. So his clearance was revoked, which meant he was cut off from SAPs in classified compartments. Now he's able to access classified compartments again because of his security clearance, but now he doesn't have full SAP access. His CAP access was blocked. He was locked out of special access programs. That continues. Adjudication was stalled, so his clearance was put into administrative purgatory. And of course, professional damage. This calls into question his integrity, his judgment, and his ultimate reliability becomes questioned. So these things matter, especially if you're David Grusch and you have a career and professional job to maintain. Now, if we get into the actual request here, what's interesting about this, as I said, is that 44 pages are missing. That is very strange that 44 pages would be missing. So as we kind of scroll through this, so this, I kind of went through all this yesterday evening. But essentially, as we scroll this, what we find is that his access to security clearances was restricted. And when he made his complaint here we can see some of his actual complaint. Even the complaint you can see is heavily redacted. But if we get into his complaint here, he says that we're filing this whistleblower complaint against the Department of Defense. That's who it was back then. Now it's Department of War, if that matters. In favor of the firm is attached herewith at tab A, and then all that information is redacted, which is pretty awesome. And then here it says I'm guessing he names the program, confidentially provided UAP related classified information to the Department of Defense Inspector General at that time, communicated classified information about redacted, believes that his identity and the fact of his UAP related communications with the DoD IG have been disclosed to individuals and or entities outside the DoD IG but within DoD, and that he has suffered retaliation and reprisal related thereto. And then it goes on about, he does have legal protections because he is technically acting as a whistleblower. And then here we run into, again, more heavily redacted information. And this can almost muddy the waters more than it can clarify things. We do get a couple of answers out of this document that I extracted and kind of broke down for you as soon as we started the show, and we'll go through it again, but you can almost get lost in this stuff between what's released and what gets redacted, because you can't fill in the blanks. If you fill in the blanks, you're not being objective. We don't know what could possibly be in those sections. And you can see every part of this complaint, like the official complaint, there's a lot of information that is redacted. Let's see here. Now we get to this page. This was filed online via DoD intake system. So this is what actually got sent to the Inspector General. And it's very similar to what got filed. We come before you to file this whistleblower reprisal complaint. He's a client of the law, blah, 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 blah. So they get into, again, heavily, heavily redacted. We get to the fourth bullet point in blank, confidentially provided UAP related classified information to the Department of Defense Inspector General. At that time, communicated classified information about redacted. Redacted believes his identity and the fact that the UAP related communications to the DoD IG have been disclosed to individuals and or entities outside the DoD IG but within DoD and the IC, is not alleging that his identity or the fact of his communication to DoD IG was improperly disclosed by any member of the DoD IG. And then we get to this next section again, just a whole bullet point completely blanked out. And again, this proceeds to go on about the whistleblower protections that David Grusch should have. So this is, just more formal stuff. This gets into the investigation itself. And we'll go to the executive summary here. So The executive summary: we conducted this investigation in response to a reprisal complaint alleging that officials at the blank revoked David Grusch's eligibility to for access to classified programs. The complaint alleged that this was done in reprisal for reporting unidentified anomalous phenomena related matters to the DoD Office of Inspector General. The complainant made 4 protected disclosures from a certain time through a certain time that's redacted for some reason. 1 to the DoD OIG, that's the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General. 1 to blank. 1 to blank. And 1 to blank. After making the first 2 protected disclosures, the blank proposed revoking the complainant's eligibility for access to classified information, including sensitive compartmented information, SCI, and later revoked his eligibility for access to classified information after reviewing the complainant's response to the proposed revocation. The complainant did not know who at the blank was responsible for the decision to revoke his eligibility for access to classified information. We found that the blank personnel responsible for making that determination were limited to 3 people in the Consolidated Adjudications Facility, or the CAF. We found that these CAF personnel did not know of the complainant's protected disclosures when they proposed the complainant's revocation, and they acted independently based on blank. Therefore, we concluded that the complainant's protected disclosures were not a contributing factor in the CAF's initial intent to revoke the complainant's eligibility for access to classified information. We found that after blank reviewed the complainant's response to the initial intent to provoke and submitted a final letter of revocation to redacted, CAF personnel learned that the complainant was claiming whistleblower status and therefore could have perceived the complainant as making protected disclosures before she approved, so we know it's a she, and signed the final LOR. However, clear and convincing evidence established that blank would have taken the same action absent the complainant's protected disclosures. We make no recommendations in this matter. So we know what that means. I mean, the breakdown from that, what we can draw from that is that the revocation of his status was not in response to him whistleblowing about UAPs. His status, his security clearance status and access had come up to be revoked before those people even knew he was a whistleblower. So it could not have been a response and a retaliation because they didn't even know that he was whistleblowing about UAPs. Come across another page. Now, again, interesting, the background information on David Grusch completely blacked out. Just the entire... Oh, wait! We can see the words. We can see the words here. Where did it go? And the complainant's duties entailed. The complainant's duty entailed and the word and. That's fantastic. Again, another heavily redacted section. Let me see if I can get this. The complainant alleged that in retaliation for these disclosures, again, this is just what you can see that's not redacted, the blank refused to allow him access to its compartmentalized access programs, UAP, and the blank revoked his eligibility for access to classified information. We discovered during our investigation that the personnel responsible for revoking the complainant's eligibility for access to classified information were redacted. Looking at the scope of the investigation, this is important too, because this is what they did and what they didn't look into, right? So this is the scope of the investigation. The investigation covered the period from 2020, when the complainant was assigned to blank, through blank. We interviewed the complainant, officials responsible for revoking and reinstating the complainant's eligibility for access to classified information, and relevant witnesses under sworn oath or affirmation. We reviewed documentary evidence about the security files and investigations, security records, adjudication records, and contemporaneous notes, as well as departmental and organizational policies, written communications, emails, instant messages, reports of investigation, and qualifying records. The complainant also alleged that various agencies across the intelligence community revoked, suspended, canceled, delayed, denied, or obstructed his access to special or compartmented programs. Those decisions regarding access to special or compartmented programs do not qualify as action affecting the complainant's eligibility for access to classified information. However, we further evaluated those actions and determined that the complainant did not have those accesses when he was hired by the blank, and that cognizant blank security personnel did not unduly delay processing the access requests. Rather, they were delayed based on redacted. Further, according to redacted, only 20% of the complainant's duties required access to these programs. Therefore, the delay in the decision to grant special or compartmented access did not constitute a significant change in the complainant's duties, responsibilities, or working conditions. This slide gets into the actual law, like the letter of the law, the legal framework. It's a two-stage process that they go through to evaluate these claims. Because when you're talking about a whistleblower being retaliated against, that's has to be pointed out, that has to be nipped in the bud right out of the gate. We cannot have whistleblowers facing reprisals because they're whistleblowing against illegal activity. Otherwise, they're not going to whistleblow. That's why that law was put in there to begin with. So it's a very intense framework. When they get these complaints, to make sure that that's not happening. And essentially what we're seeing here is that the messaging that he lost his security clearance because he whistleblowed about UAPs and he was poking his nose around special access programs. According to this IG investigation, is not actually the case. His security clearance was up for revocation, and the 3 people in charge of that decision had no idea he was going to be a part of a UAP whistleblowing hearing, essentially. So, I'm sorry. We get into the actual findings of fact. Events occurring before employment. On October 9th, 2020, while the complainant was working as redacted, the blank Special Access Program Central Office SAPCO suspended his Special Access Program in response to a potential security violation. The violation involved, and of course, that's blanked out. So we don't know, they don't say what the violation was in regards to. Pending an investigation into the incident, both blank and the blank suspended the complainant's special accesses. So again, October 9th, 2020, he's working at some capacity at some kind of special access program. And in response to a potential security violation, we don't know what because they've withheld that information, his security clearance, his security clearance came up for revocation. As the complainant also had access to blank programs at the time, the redacted notified the redacted of the complainant's suspension, and the blank suspended the complainant's access to redacted SCI on November 5th, 2020, until the matter was resolved. So until they could investigate the issue further, his security clearance was revoked temporarily. On November 18th, 2020, someone entered an incident report into the Defense Information System for security, acknowledging that someone received documentation from redacted indicating that it was suspending the complainant's access due to the blank, revoking his eligibility. Additionally, the blank entered the complainant's security incident into the Defense Information System for security and scattered castles. The following investigation concluded that blank occurred and that the complainant failed to comply with security requirements as outlined in DoD Manual 5200.01, Volume 1, DoD Information Security Program Overview, Classification, and Declassification, February 24, 2012. The investigating officer recommended that the complainant, and that part is redacted. Additionally, blank recommended that the blank SAP CO notify the blank SAP CO of the complainant's security violation. However, after the complainant answered questions, blank reinstated the complainant's SCI access, and the security officer notified the CAF on December 17th, 2020. And then we get this page that, this is supposed to be the findings of fact. And we're supposed to make sense of this. I mean, we're not supposed to. Obviously, the government, whoever's handling this case, is supposed to. But this is what we get in the FOIA response. So it's so hard to make sense of how this initial incident that supposedly took place caused his access to be denied. But they do tell us in the findings that the access was up for revocation before he became a whistleblower, before anybody knew he was going to be a whistleblower. So what we see on this page, the security office notified the blank Office of Personal Security via a loss of jurisdiction memorandum on or about September 1, 2021, that the blank might have an adjudicative interest in the matter with the complainant. The memorandum stated that the complainant had, and again, just totally redacted. And that's very frustrating because I get it. People have a right to privacy. Just because they work on these programs or work for the government doesn't mean we need to know everything about their personal life and stuff like that. So I totally get it. And we want to make sure that we take security clearances and these, safety, security of the country into account. Totally understand that. But that, you can't even make sense of the findings of fact, because look at how redacted just the first 2 pages are. They can't even say who the employment was with. They redacted that part. Events occurring during employment with the blank. In some parts, they redact the date on redacted as part of the complainant's pre-employment with the whoever reviewed scattered castles and noticed that blank had removed the complainant's access with its agency. They contacted the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, Consolidated Adjudication Services, and inquired whether DCSA-CIS had reviewed the information before granted the complainant a favorable DoD eligibility for access to classified information on September 7, 2021. Blank wrote that the blank was hiring the complainant as a civilian, but Scattered Castles was, quote, throwing up red flags. The DCSA-CIS responded to blank that it reviewed the information, the issues surrounding the complainant were mitigated, and the complainant was no longer redacted. Someone notified the whoever redacted that the redacted CAF would not be in the business of second-guessing and undermining fellow DoD adjudication decisions. So the CAF agreed to reciprocate the DCSA-CIS favorable adjudication and complete the complainant's employment package. The complainant began employment with the redacted. On December 28, 2021, the Continuous Evaluations Program determined that the blank did not have records regarding the complainant's redacted, stating an interview was required to resolve this. And then again, it's like a whole paragraph redacted. On January 27, 2022, the CE was notified of the loss of jurisdiction memorandum from the blank of the complainant's possible redacted while employed. This is impossible to read. I feel like an idiot reading it, and you're probably not enjoying hearing it. But essentially, after going through all this again, what we find is that Grusch disclosed UAP SAPs. That was confirmed. Grusch used classified channels. We know that. ODNI and DODIG coordinated. So we can see the coordination and the work. His clearance was most certainly revoked. SAP access was blocked. And there's multiple secret pages, and the pages that we do have access to, again, are just heavily redacted. And then on top of that, we have 44 fully classified pages. Formal invocation of PPD 19. We don't see that anywhere. We don't see the actual reason the SCI was revoked. We just hear that they made the decision to revoke it. So anyone telling you they know why it was revoked, that can't be true. They're making it up. It's conjecture. We don't know. We just know that it was revoked due to some incident. They say they do know that he's disclosing UAP information because of the original whistleblowing complaint, but they don't confirm which information matters. And they talk about intelligence community leaks, but all throughout this paper, what you can gather through all the redacted information is that there's no information that could get us anywhere close to figuring out who or if or what there was a leak. So if we get into this further, this document further, again, it's a lot of very heavily redacted pages, but it gets into the specifics of how they know that these individuals that were in charge of revoking his security status were not aware of him disclosing anything about UAPs. And so because of that, there's absolutely no way that what they were doing could have been retaliation for that. Now, PPD 19 created the first ever legal protection for people who work inside SAPs, SCI, sensitive compartmented information, and intelligence community black programs. Before PPD 19, there was no whistleblower protection for anyone. Think about that. Before Obama, if you wanted to come forward as a whistleblower from some type of special access program, black program, whatever, you weren't given any whistleblower guarantees or any whistleblower protections. Then no protection at all. Now again, here's what we know from the FOIA. Anybody saying they know more, it's conjecture. You cannot know more than what they've released. And if you did, you certainly, if you did know that and you were put in a position where you could disclose it, you wouldn't. Especially not publicly. Because we can see all through this report how heavily redacted it is. I mean, you could probably string this together to say a lot of stuff and follow a lot of narratives. But at the end of the day, the facts are the facts. It doesn't match up with David Grusch's complaint. I'm getting harassed. I'm getting singled out. I'm losing security clearance, which is imperative to me providing for my family and surviving. Well, it's not because you testified about UAPs. We can conclusively say that. Then why was his security clearance status up for revocation? I don't know. That part is redacted. What we know is that some kind of incident put up a red flag. I don't know what that was. It doesn't say. If it does say, it's blacked out. It's redacted. They're not sharing it with us. All right, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come right back with another David Grusch interview.
Gabriel speaks. Evidence laid out beneath the frequency. Gabriel speaks. He shows the signs pointing out hypocrisy. Gabriel speaks, cutting through the night. Gabriel speaks, shining a searching light. He brings the pieces for the world to see where it leads up to.
So what happened yesterday? I didn't read the news.
My name is David Charles Grusch. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW.
Why were you placed on the UAPTF? And the UAPTF, for the people that don't know, is Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Task Force.
The UAP task force director funneled a request through the ops center, like, hey, is there any intel officer for your agency would be willing to be a representative on the task force to kind of fill that void with expertise from NRO and the Air Force. And my boss got the email, he forwarded it to me, and he's like, do you want to do this? And I thought, well, I'm a reservist.
Yeah.
I can put it on my performance report that I worked on like a task force.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be kind of an interesting thing to see what was going on.
When did you start to realize that you weren't just kind of looking at, anomalous phenomena and trying to classify it in the air, but you were being sort of systematically lied to about an internal reverse engineering program within the government?
Yeah, I mean, certainly going into it, I thought it was going to be, air trash, some prosaic natural phenomenon. I remember starting interviewing some military members that saw some really profound stuff, like, large, triangular craft, football field size that they, hovered over them. And I was like, whoa, and these people were very serious, very upset to actually divulge that, a personal thing. It's nothing classified. It was a personal observation they had on a drive to work.
Yeah.
And then, one thing led to another. I had, certain colleagues of mine that I've known for years approached me, closed the door in my office and was like, look, you need to know about some other stuff you guys are not, getting access to. And kind of led down this.
Why do you think they talked? Why do you think they spoke to you?
Yeah, I think a lot of these guys were, they've kept the secret for so many years. They knew me. They knew what I was looking into. We reported to the Deputy Secretary of Defense in Congress at the time with the UAP task force. And I think they wanted some change. At least that's what they espoused to me is.
Why do you think they wanted change?
They felt that they were kind of limited in bringing people in, the support they were getting, their treatment was harsh sometimes. And I guess they weren't really feeling the love anymore.
What's the first moment where you saw irrefutable evidence that what you're dealing with is truth, is reality?
I mean, there were certain military cases, we were analyzing that I just really couldn't explain in a prosaic fashion.
What can you tell me about these craft? Why do you know it's exotic?
Based on the very specific properties that I was briefed on, isotopic ratios that would have to be engineered for it to be at those levels. And then, of course, read some, intel reports that were provided to me in that regard. And, I took that and I went to the agencies that wrote those reports and asked for access. And when they deny you access, then it's a thing. Yeah. So it's and that's what happened to me time after time over a couple of years.
So there wasn't a singular moment where you're like, just open the folder and you go, what the fuck is that? And
it was kind of like a slow burn culmination as I was processing it, allowing my worldview to open. And yeah, I don't know if there was a singular moment. I think it was, some of the really, really trusted high level people we talked to when they, stared us straight in the face very seriously and, confirmed a lot of this information. And the quality of people we talk to, if they ever go public, it'll blow your mind who we talk to. I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm talking to X, who's a really important person, and they're confirming these certain details, and they're saying like, we need to protect this at all costs, and they're giving me kind of the whole speech about it. And I'm sitting there, it's like an out-of-body experience. I'm like, okay, well, this is a thing. I don't report to anybody.
It makes you wonder, like, he says this is a thing. And I mean, for me, it makes me wonder if he means this is a thing because it's real, or this is a thing because he believes it's real, right? Like, I'm getting more and more to that has a lot to do with my decision whether I'm going to listen to what you're saying or not, right? Because like, if you're peddling bullshit, then I want nothing to do with you. But if you believe what you're saying, you believe what you're doing, and you feel like what you're doing is right, then like how could you hold that against someone personally? So if the information is real or fake, if he believes it's real, to me, that means all the difference in the world to what I think of David Grusch as a person. And he does come across as someone who believes what he is saying. He has a lot of conviction in what he says.
And there is no plan.
Yeah.
I'm not a part of some like slow drip disclosure or anything. If there is a plan, I'm totally unwitting, and holy shit, they've like controlled me in a very passive manner that is like masterclass.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not a part of some weird shit, that.
Did you ever at any point try to suss out whether you were being lied to? Because all of these people
100%.
are coming from the same programs. And so presumably there's some level of coordination between them. So how do you kind of get through and just make sure that they're not, meeting in some back room saying, you say this to Dave?
Also, can someone tell me what they're actually doing here? They like spend a weekend vacation together, or it's super weird.
I'll say this to Dave, you know.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, like, I thought maybe it was like a joke or something. Maybe it was like a psyop on me or something. I don't even know. And then, but the, near 40 people we talked to, a lot of the guys, I've known my entire career. And, like, they wouldn't lie to me. I have, like, a friendship with them. And for them to, disclose to me that kind of stuff and it ended up being a false would have totally torpedoed the friendship. And I also went out of my way to find people who don't know each other either. And I had other very higher ranking colleagues of mine go talk to other people that I didn't even personally talk to.
Okay, I'm gonna say what probably some of you are thinking. How could you work in the intelligence community? How could you work in that field and not believe that so-called friends would lie to you and tank the relationship? What? I mean, that seems like day one stuff they would teach you in regards to intelligence, CIA stuff, spying, things like that. You would think that he would be fully aware that people befriend you and lie to you so they can manipulate you and mislead you. Interesting that he thinks that way, I think. And this was a while ago. This is on Jesse Michaels. This is a couple years ago.
That group, of course, we took all that, and I'm like, all the people who conducted those interviews, I made them get interviewed by the Inspector General because we're crossing our T's here because this shit is crazy. Yeah. And you can never be perfect, but man, I was so freaking careful to make sure I wasn't getting fed some bullshit. If they were in coordination together on a disinfo campaign, holy fuck, I shouldn't even be an intel officer because I should have sniffed that shit out. So.
In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
There's a Chris Mellon story where he's supposed to meet with somebody on the program and he has the meeting all set up. And 2 weeks before the meeting, he says that the guy just randomly has a heart.
So there's a part of this interview I want to review because of all the stuff they talk about. They're talking about a lot of the, was I the victim of a psychological operation myself? Was I manipulated to think this way about stuff? But also, they have this really cool conversation about like the science of what we're seeing with UFO and UAP craft. And that, I think, is extremely interesting.
Yeah.
Like, where are we in that?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is, it's hard to gauge how far in advance it is because you're just assuming a certain linear progression.
It would become a nuclear engineering test facility.
That there is no cover-up, no cover-up.
Okay. I think this is pretty close to the right spot, and where he gets into the actual, kind of explains some of the science that may be behind what people are seeing in the sky.
No cover-up, no cover-up.
I've seen this in other conventional programs. You compartment it so much. Some people don't know really what they're working on.
Yeah.
Only the people that have the top level accesses can look down on all facets of the pyramid, as we say, and that hinders progress. And then certainly with this subject, when you're trying to crack an unknown, that kind of obtuse security doesn't help either. So.
When you say unknown, is it the USB drive to a caveman analogy, where it's like the caveman doesn't know information theory, doesn't have a computer to plug the USB drive into, and we just don't even know where to start in terms of reverse engineering things?
Well, it's like other people have given the analogies, like giving Galileo a TI-83 TI-83 plus graphing calculator. They open it up and they see circuitry and they're like, well, what is even this? I don't have a concept of a transistor.
But even that, or like a monkey with an iPhone, you kind of know how to, if you open it up, sure, you're confused, but you kind of know how to press the buttons and you realize there's this graphical interface or whatever. That seems easier than caveman with a USB drive. So like, where are we in that?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is, it's hard to gauge how far in advance it is because you're just assuming a certain linear progression. You know, I think some of this is they made an asymptotal leap that, you know, put them over the edge to a different kind of plane of.
That's pretty fascinating,
Yeah,
like a different timeline almost.
If I was a betting man, some of this NHI, they're similarly as advanced as us, but they've just made, asymmetric evolution or whatever. They went a different path where we made nuclear weapons and stuff. They ended up making this like civil propulsion kind of equivalent discovery where they're able to do this now, but they're actually not that much more advanced than you and I.
I always found interesting, you know, sort of the monolith in 2001 Space Odyssey, which is this sort of thing placed on Earth that it inspires tech innovation. It's almost like John Mack would talk about a lot of these alien sightings being slightly more advanced but barely comprehensible tech for the time, almost inspiring tech innovation.
I often think of it as laying breadcrumbs in a direction.
Well, the communication could be, you think you're really smart because you blew up a weapon down the road here. Now, you know, look at this.
Right.
Well, it's just like, you know, we went from, you look at our own human development, you know, we immediately, once we cracked the atom, I mean, holy crap, nuclear power, nuclear weapons, you know, we went from, you know, orders of magnitude of energy extraction, right, up to, you know, 10 to the 6 tons of TNT equivalent. And that's kind of what we're talking about is like, we're like one, you know, discovery away to, you know, maybe manipulate space-time or whatever.
Based off of the information that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs are interested in our nuclear technology and capabilities?
Yes. By external observation, sure, that could be a fair assessment, yeah. Yes.
The nuclear UFO connection is deeper and more bizarre than you can ever imagine. Remember that Vice story that ran in 20...
Okay, so we're going to get... We know about the UAPs, UFOs around nuke bases. Been in the lore for quite some time, going back to Bob Salas and that kind of stuff. So we know all about that. And again, I think it's interesting the knowledge that Mr. Grusch has about the science, the potential science behind the UFOs and the UAPs. It makes me wonder, like, what actual program he was, you know, working in. Why is everything so heavily redacted in this FOIA response? It's very curious.
Missile-man radar operators at nuclear sites who have no incentive.
Manipulating space-time and an occubear, you know.
Is it some weird, like they're mining us for something, and so they want to protect their...
So you heard him mention the occubear. So this is where it gets into the potential explanation for some of the propulsion. I think it's very interesting.
Resources, or is it the power unlock thing where we could rip space-time and maybe be able to travel like they can travel? Yeah. And so, you know, nuclear power is the axis along which we're making progress towards that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it might be as simple as like it's an attractant, like a fly or a mosquito to a blue light, right? It could be something as simple as that. I mean, it's so hard because to put yourself in a different sentient shoes to understand intent and all that. I mean, could be probing, could be reconnaissance, could be just, you know, mere curiosity. Yes, you know, oh, they're only, you know, 2 or 3 orders of magnitude away, energy extraction from, you know, manipulating space-time and an occubear, you know, warp drive type thing. And maybe they're interested in that too, to understand our development as a civilization. I mean, without having, you know, a penetration into their OODA loop or whatever, we'll never really know.
Yeah.
It could be all of the above. yeah, and it's really impossible to really ever gauge intent.
The controller told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space.
It's just this cat and mouse sort of recursive unsolvability, where it's just very hard to classify. It's almost like playing with you a little bit. Even Commander David Fravor in his account was like, the thing felt like it was like breathing and looking at me and knew, he even said it, you let it slip in the testimony. It was like, it definitely was aware of our existence. I'm like, how do you know that, man? You're not in the UFO's shoes. But yeah, I understand what he was saying, which is you can sense when somebody's looking at you.
Yeah, I know. I've had some folks I talked to that had their own kind of up close kind of sightings. They said that they got that vibe too. And who knows if that's psychosomatic or what, but they did get a vibe like that too.
When you stare into the abyss long enough, the abyss stares back.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course, I've had a very smart guy was like, well, did Darwin care to fully conceal himself when he studied the finches? And it's like, they observe, they don't really care.
Right.
And they don't really care to interact, but they're just here to observe. But
is that your bias, that it's sort of an anthropological, zoological model where they're like studying us and we're in this kind of petri dish kind of thing?
I think, I'll give credit to Lou for the whole gorilla in the cage and, throw it a banana, throw it the key and see if it can unlock the cage. And maybe that's what's, some of these, crashes were. And it wasn't really a mission failure, if you will. It was, maybe some seeding. This is a total theoretical framework here.
So it's like,
we'll never really know, but
see what you can do with this. Or the key is nuclear power or something, and it's like the gorilla we have the key. Another analogy that Eric Weinstein loves to use is he talks about North Sentinel Island, which is an island of Aboriginals who basically have not made any contact with civilization. It's off the coast of India, and the Indian government basically just lets them do their thing and kind of respects them. And take this analogy: if the North Sentinelese started developing nukes, maybe the Indian government would start to pay a little more attention. To the extent that there is interference, I think one anomaly that's important to talk about is it seems to be like there's a lot of electromagnetic radiation that comes off of these crafts. And I remember talking to Gary Nolan, and he mentioned that he was kind of given a file by the CIA, and he was tasked with looking into this, and it was two things. It was people who had anomalous UFO experiences, and it was people who had experienced Havana syndrome.
Diplomats and spies began to hear sounds and fall ill with a mysterious illness that people struggled to explain, what became known as Havana syndrome.
And in both cases, you have these kind of severe electromagnetic radiation effects, and often differences in the caudate nucleus and putamen, which is in the basal ganglia, the dorsal striatum of the brain, the scarring. But also the neuronal density of that area of the brain would cause somebody to even make sort of contact. But do we have any theories on kind of the electromagnetic radiation component?
I mean, certainly if we were to look at it from like a relativistic perspective, well, that sounds like visible band light being blue shifted into the ultraviolet, and you're getting literally a sunburn. And if you look at an Ocubear type thing where light's getting lensed around the craft, etc., stuff should be blue and red shifting. So things coming towards you would actually red shift spectrally, and the people getting like burns. So that's ultraviolet. That's like ionizing radiation. So that would be light being blue shifted into the ultraviolet as it's lensed across the bubble that the craft creates. And so we are seeing artifacts that seem to show that they're basically manipulating space-time.
And I guess that's why you get this sort of skipping across time.
So that's pretty fascinating. To me, I think that's pretty fascinating because you just had them in one foul swoop explain what could be happening with the science behind these craft, if indeed these are craft, and also, oh, by the way, how they're doing it. So very Very interesting stuff. But yeah, why would he know that? Again, there's just so much strangeness. I think there's just a lot we don't know yet about David Grusch. And hopefully down the road we'll start seeing more and more of this report, because what was redacted, again, it just makes it so difficult to even read through it. Okay, this is some breaking UFO news. We've got James Fox talking to George Knapp here and that other guy about this Varhania deal. Now, this doctor, we played his testimony before. This doctor said that he was one of the doctors that was helping to treat the alien being that was recovered from Varhania. And it's been over 20 years since this case happened. But James Fox was able, this guy reached out to him, let him know, hey, I was one of the doctors that was there. And he's been going on about how he saw the alien, saw the being. And we saw James Fox get very emotional in that interview. So here is, this just dropped just a couple hours ago. So let's take a look. This is a preview, and then we'll get into the actual interview as well.
Em 1996, no dia 20 de janeiro, eu fui chamado para ver paciente, né? E quando eu fui ver, não era ser do nosso planeta, né? Cabecinha grande, mas em forma de gota.
We interviewed the doctor that worked on him while he was alive, Dr. Cesario, and then just now, for the first time, participating in the new cut of Moment of Contact, we got an interview. Thank you, Marco Leal, for helping make that happen with the two forensic pathologists. One that did the autopsy on the deceased military officer. His name is Dr. Armando. He's a forensic pathologist. And then his partner, Dr. Giannini, who founded the company, IPD Labs. Dr. Giannini studied the tissue samples, and he's coming forward in the film saying, I've never seen anything like this bacteria perform the way the bacteria did with him.
Crazy, right? Obviously, we're going to have to be very discerning here, because, again, James Fox, this is the man that gave us the Dolphin Slayer. And don't get me wrong, I think Jason Sands is just a super nice guy. Good sense of humor, funny, sweet as can be, but I don't know how much we can believe what he's been putting out there. And so if this is the gentleman that counts on that witness, then it's really tough to know what we can believe and what we can't believe. So be discerning, folks. At any rate, this episode was, we just wanted to break down the FOIA return, and it looks like from the Grusch FOIA, from the Grusch IG complaint, what we can see is that yes, his clearance was revoked. His clearance was suspended. However, it wasn't because he was testifying about UAPs and UFOs and whatnot. And that's pretty conclusive. That they investigated it pretty thoroughly, and they found that these three individuals that were in charge of the possible revocation of his clearance didn't even know about his testimony about UAPs. So hard to argue with that. All right, folks, I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in. You have a great rest of your week.